gonna try this again. So welcome everybody.
Thank you.
This is our 7th class, although it will be listed online as class 6 because the first class didn't have a number. I don't know how this went. Hopefully my computer doesn't die on me again. And tonight we are going to talk about Premiere Plus to modify functions. Now, when we talk about modify functions, I am working tonight primarily in part of design enhancer. Did I freeze again?
Slip again.
She thinks Comcast, they're hardwired. She thinks Comcast, her internet.
It almost has to be your computer, Bonnie,
There's nothing on that computer that should be doing that.
because mine's okay.
Available and
Yeah. Oh, good. She's back.
I hope. I don't see that she is.
Yes, she is, but she's not being heard. She's on mute.
Oh,
I'm on mute. Yes, you're right. If for some reason it brings me in muted. Okay,
Oh,
let's
there you go.
try the screen share and let's see if I can screen share. Okie dokie. Maybe if we take all the pictures away, it'll stop doing stupid things. So try this again. Welcome. We are going to go ahead into our Premiere Plus embroidery system. I'm going to first go into Premiere Plus to configure, and I am going to reset all modules. That will just take us to a place where, I forget about the beeps, where we all have the same base screen to look at. I'm not going to look at me. And then from there, I'm going to go ahead and open Premiere Plus to embroidery. I am going to real quickly try and turn off my video. So, because I make weird faces and you guys don't want to watch those weird faces. So within this system, there are 2 versions of kind of modify. And we talked about the one previously on the embroidery extra and ultra. On the main screen, we have this modify icon on the top toolbar, and it won't let me select it because I don't have a design on screen. But that is not where we are. I'm going to go to the bottom toolbar.
Are you sharing your screen?
I am. Can you not see it?
Well, it could be me.
Okay,
Yeah,
hang
I see
on.
it.
Hang on.
It could be me.
on the view tab,
That's exactly what I was trying to
view
do.
standard, it's a little icon way on the top right on my Windows unit.
I'm gonna pin me. And can I spotlight me?
Okay, I got it. Thank
Got
you.
me. Okay. So does everybody see the embroidery software on my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does anybody just see my logo?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay. And what I'm trying to do is figure out how to navigate with all these other pop-up things here. So rather than use the, and Barbie's here, she's moderating chat for me as well. Rather than use the modify up here at the very top of our main screen, we're actually going to go to the modify module. And Karen and I talked about an hour and a half ago. And this is one of my complaints about this software, is that they moved all of these links down to this bottom of the screen. And they're so stinking tiny that they're near impossible to see. But if we scroll across them, normally it pops up.
Yeah, it's the scissors.
Yep, it's the scissors. But normally if I hover, it tells me the name. But I think with Zoom running, it's doing some strange things. So the third little teeny tiny, barely visible icon from the left is modify. So if I open that, I get a screen that looks very familiar, looks very much like what I just had, but I can tell you that now, if I look at my taskbar at the bottom of my screen, I have both my Premiere Plus 2 embroidery screen, and then to the right of that, I have Premiere Plus 2 modify. So modify is basically the same concept as modify that we had in Premiere Plus 2 embroidery extra, because say that 7 times fast. But it's got a whole lot more oomph to it. A lot more capability, a lot more features and functions, and a lot more editing, including things like, oh, the little chart, the graph here on my hoop, so I know kind of how far I am out from center. In order to make sure that we're all working on the same looking screen, we're going to go ahead and change our hoop. So that's that same icon that we're used to. It's still on the top toolbar. And we're going to leave our hoop group on universal. And let's go ahead and drop down to universal large hoop 5, which is the 360 by 260. So this is basically the equivalent of the hoop that's on the Epic 2, the Icon, and the new Icon 2 that are all coming out. And we want to leave that in a natural position and say, okay, so that gives us this very long and rather wide hoop. Of the machines out there, the only machine that has a hoop that is bigger than this right now is either the Solaris 2, Luminaire 2. Those have a slightly wider hoop and a little bit longer than this one, just for comparison's sake. So once I have my hoop on screen, I obviously am going to need a design, but how's about we do multiple designs? So we're going to insert a design. So I could do file and open like we had before, but I'm going to actually go to the top, very tippy top toolbar and go to insert, which is the little yellow folder with the green arrow. And if I hover over this one, it's behaving. And we're going to browse to under documents or my documents, Premiere Plus 2. Samples. I actually ran through all this earlier, you guys, I promise. Premiere Plus 2, Explore, Stitch, and then Geometric. Now, my Geometric came up with the thumbnails because I've been in this folder already today. But if you do not have thumbnails, we have a view option. And this is Windows 10, just so everybody knows, this probably may look a little different than my last computer. And wherever my view function is, based on which version of Windows you have, your default probably came in like this, the list, or it may have come in with details. Okay, but I like to see what I'm looking at, so I go to icons. And if I have less things on my screen, I'll go to large icons. And so remember that every time we go into a folder, we have to reset this information. So every time we browse to a particular folder, we want to do a reset. I'm going to quickly just mention that if you look at the spirals right here and the spiral down here, they are the same design, but the one on the bottom has been morphed. And so I will try and point that out again when I get to where I'm going. What we want to do is actually select these first 3 designs. So I can either click in the box on Windows 10, or I can use the control button on my keyboard and hold that control button down and then click on each of these. So depending upon which version of Windows you have, it may behave differently. Or I can left click on the first one and then touch my shift button, hold that down, and then click on the last. So that third option with the shift button is like parentheses. I want to go from here to here. Control differently would allow me to pick and choose. So if I wanted 1 and not 2, but 3 and 4, I would use my control button on my keyboard. So that's kind of the difference. They work similarly, but differently at the same time. If I have all 3 of these selected, we'll say open, and they're all going to come up on my screen. Now, this is where things are different. In the old Modify, not old, but in the Modify that's part of the extra screen, when I have multiple designs, only one comes up, and it looks very similar to what I see here. I only have 2 colors. It's the last design that I picked. It was the swirls. But what's different is now I have at the top of the screen this design selection. So I could say, you know what, I want to work on the bullseye, or I want to work on this 60s circle, or I want to work on the spirals. So I can really easily sort of pan or click back and forth between those. Now, if I wanted to work on all 3 of these at the same time, it gets a little more complicated, but this is me, and this is not me following the directions. But what I would do is I would select all that were visible from one design, and I might move it a little bit out of the way. And then I would pick the next design and select all that's visible up here on the top toolbar. And I might move that one out of the way. And for me, that just gives me the ability to kind of see them all individually. Even though only one is active, I like the fact that I can see them separately. Now, if I were trying to build something together, maybe I wanted a background and a tree and a cloud and a sun, I might not separate them. I might actually go ahead and position them to where I want them to be in order to make my modifications and see how those changes impact different pieces of that, even though the others are ghosted out. And I'm
Bunny,
hoping-
if you had had a smaller hoop, would they have all fitted in the smaller hoop too?
well, we picked a bigger hoop for this purpose.
Okay,
If I had a smaller hoop, well, let's see what happens if I have a smaller
I was
hoop.
just curious as if they scaled or if they were large designs.
No, there's a 100 by 100 hoop.
Oh, okay,
So
thank
the
you,
design itself is big.
thank you.
You're welcome. No, the design itself is big. So this does give me the ability to kind of play with this. And I'm just trying to move the zoom controls out of the way, because now I have controls at the top, at the bottom, on the right, everywhere. And zoom is just kind of in my way at the moment. So with all of this advanced functionality, now I was able to select the different pieces up here in the design select, but if I look at the bottom of the screen, okay, here in the center, this is design player. To the right of this, okay, I've got a color block option that works within an existing design. Okay, and then if I go back up here to the design select, I just clicked on the different designs, but there are these little arrows to the left and right. So I could use the arrows to move through them. So whichever way works best for you. Now, the same arrows at the bottom of the screen, I can look at each segment of a design. Okay, so this one's just 2 colors. So I can do segment 1, segment 2. This doesn't rotate through. It doesn't just keep spinning 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It goes from the start with color 1 to the end with color 2. Whereas up here, if I use my arrows, it rotates through. Again, one of the things that I'm sort of weird about, I feel like there should be some consistency, but I'm also not a computer programmer, which is why they love to talk to me. Because I'm like, but can't you? And they're like, no. But what we actually want to have active is the bullseye. It's actually called metallic circle, but looks like a bullseye to me. So let's make sure that that design is active. We can tell it's active because it has the design selection box around it. It also is highlighted in my design select. And if I look to the right, you'll see that this is a 4-color design. Now, in the previous piece of software. When I went to the modify tab, I was able to manipulate these by coming in and unchecking or ghosting out different segments of the design. And I can still do that. And I will tell you, for me personally, this consistency is key with me. I'm probably going to use those check marks. But remember, down here at the bottom, I can use my draw next color block. And that's actually a faster way to isolate a single color or a single segment within the design. Okay, so we have choices. We have choices to be made as we go through this process. Once I have a segment that I may want to do something with, I can access this a couple of different ways. On the top toolbar, we have this select section here, box select, freehand point select, select stitches, select color blocks, select all visible. And then if you see to the right of select all visible, there's one of those little drop down arrows. And there is select none. So if I want to unselect everything on screen, that will do that. However, remember that I was on color block 2 of this design. So it doesn't reselect all of those. I want everything reselected. I go back to draw all stitches down here in the bottom right, or if I just add the check marks for all these others. But the reason that I'm pointing this out is these same controls here only appear on the home tab. So if I go to modify or I go to border, I go to any of these others, I don't have those anymore. But this is a piece of the software where it really does help to have all those controls, and they are down here on the little teeny tiny toolbar at the bottom. So I've got those same controls. We will want to have those controls. Now, y'all know I have opinions, right? Why they couldn't just let it appear up here because it looks like there's space on this screen is beyond me. But they couldn't. So I'm like, why is it at the bottom and it's little teeny tiny? But we have choices. And depending upon how you work, whether you look up or down or left or right, it really, having more than one way to skin that cat is really, really helpful. So let's talk about this design that we wanted selected. We have the bullseye. I want to be able to work with it. So I'm going to select all visible. Now, when you get these handouts and they're already uploaded, but they have not been made available for download yet, these designs are all still stacked on top of one another. So I don't want you to panic if when you get the handout, if you choose to, it doesn't match what you saw on my screen. So once I have this particular design selected, now I can work within it. And we talked about select all visible, select none. I'm still on this design. Even if I'm on select none, all 4 colors are still there. And if I hover over them, you'll see that they turn into some shade of blue or black. Okay. Down at the bottom, I have this color bar. And the color bar really allows me to move from the left or the right so that I can kind of quickly mimic the drawing of stitches. Okay, now I got pretty close to the end of that color. And if I try and get just one more stitch, I might get there. Oh, I did that reasonably well. But normally I can't get this little color bar to stop on the exact spot. And I can draw from the left and the right as well. So that helps me kind of fine tune in and focus on something. Now I'm going to quickly use this zoom to rectangle at the bottom of the screen so that we can look at just this design and not everything else. And you'll see here, I didn't get it quite there. And it's kind of a hard catch-22 between finding the exact placement. Now, if I really need to be super precise with this kind of control, I have my stitches here. So I have my stitch numbers. So I can literally go up a stitch, down a stitch, to get exactly where I want to be. But that's, you know, potentially a whole lot harder.
Is that just above row 25? Is that going to be a missed stitch?
You know, I think that's probably got something to do with either here or it may be the Zoom. It can, I mean, not the Zoom program that we're using, but the Zoom in.
Okay.
So it's kind of hard sometimes to tell. I can tell you that it most definitely is part of the file, but we're zoomed in really, really far.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can use these to get sort of super precise if I need to be. And I have been known to be this sort of precise on things.
Well, you got
And
that
then-
part nicely.
Yep, and then you see, then we jumped here and there's a C, this is a cut. Okay, so this is different than the other system. I'm now getting things like cut commands and trim commands showing up on my screen. What we really want to do is go ahead and zoom into, they did give us some instructions here, color number 1. And so if I slide this slide bar all the way back to number 1, and I bring this other slide over to the end of color 1, and that is technically stitch number 2274. Okay,
2287.
yeah, is it in the instructions?
I don't know.
2287. Barbie says
Oh, when I
2287.
took the other colors away to put shit up.
Oh, yep, and then we're adding, you can see we're adding the next color on top. So this is how I can get that super precise, or again, I can just ghost out my colors as I need to. I'm going to go ahead and pull this all the way back out so we can see everything, including some of these other controls. And I'm going to move this one just in so it's not floating over the numbers anymore. And I'm going to use Design Player at the bottom of the screen. So I'm going to play through these stitches. And I'm going to play a little bit faster. But in order to play that, I need everything to be at the beginning. I did this earlier. Okay. So there's my Design Player. This particular satin stitch just has somewhat of an edge walk to it. It doesn't have a whole lot of underlay, but it does have those 2 straight lines to help kind of hold. And this is a satin stitch with a with 2 stitch points in each pass because it would be too wide of a satin stitch. And so this is a little bit more precise of a Design Player where I can go forward and backward. And for me, I like this better than the Design Player that comes up in the other piece of the software. Okay. Now, if I'd had a stop here, the machine would give me the stop, but you see we did have a cut that came up, that blue control there. We've got a satin stitch around the edge. So I like to point out where we get all these different controls, where we see the cuts come in, where we see in some cases some stop commands come in. If we want to pause for each color control, okay, I can not do what I just did. Sorry. If I want to pause for each color control, we can actually pause for commands, which is this icon here to the left. Go ahead and let this one finish out. And you'll see the same Here's my rotation control handle here on the right. Here's my mirror image on the left. We have the same 4 corners. And then we have some new little controls here with these little trapezoidy pieces. Okay, so I turned the pause for commands, paused for a second, we got another cut, jumped over. So this really lets me see a lot more. And then we can do this faster if we'd like, and we can go super fast. And when we hit that pause, it pauses for a second. It doesn't stop completely, but it does add an additional pause. I went ahead and hit the stop button as soon as I saw it pause, because now I have, again, another cut command, and I can point out really quickly this center crosshair is our point of rotation. Okay, so I can move, we've talked about this before, I can move my point of rotation that pivots from there. So that hasn't changed. And here's my little rhombusy guys. And see how that does some weird skewy stuff. So I'm going to bring those back to normal. Okay, so this is just where the controls are, what they do. And again, the different color blocks. So we can jump through all of those. If I need to see the other colors as I'm doing this, I can turn on ghost mode, which is already active for the other designs, but I can turn on ghost mode within this particular design so that I can see where the placement of each of those other segments is.
Where are you turning on ghost mode?
Ghost mode is bottom right here. See where I am?
Oh, okay.
Okay. And then if I want to see everything, this is draw all stitches. Okay. And if maybe I'm on this one, but I want to see all the others, I have an inversion control. So it'll just basically flip the ones that are on and the ones that are off, and vice versa. And then draw previous stop. I haven't been able to get these to activate. So Karen might be able to tell me.
Bunny, can you repeat that?
Oh, so I haven't been able to get the draw previous stops, draw next step, stop to appear. They're grayed out at the moment, right?
Let me go back to mine.
That's okay.
I've been switching between my view and,
That's okay. So I can access all these different segments different ways. Just more than one way to skin a cat. I can turn them all on and off by clicking in the color selection, or I can use the segments down at the bottom, or I can use my draw arrows, or these sort of scroll bars, as I like to call them. So however you get to whatever it is that you want to modify, because it may be within an existing design, don't feel like any one way is necessarily correct or incorrect. But what I do want to do is go ahead and get to color number 1. So however you want to do that, if I want to go with my draw next color block, or if I want to uncheck all my other colors over here, or if I want to use the scroll bars, however you get to that large donut-y looking piece. And I want to go ahead and copy it. Okay, so I'm going to select all that's visible and I'm going to go to copy. Now you'll see copy now has some drop downs underneath of it where we haven't always had that. I'm just going to copy. And I'm going to make sure that I copied the correct thing by checking my clipboard in the bottom right-hand corner. And that should appear. And now what I want to do is bring this into a place where I can go ahead and add it. Now I'm going to go back out to my full hoop because remember I had zoomed in the zoom to rectangle. I'm going to go this little plus mark on the bottom toolbar, zoom to fit. That's going to take me back out to my whole hoop. And I can just paste. Okay. And when I paste this and I move it around, you see what it does to the design and the design selection? It kind of goes, okay, this is all still part of the same design. So whatever I'm doing, as soon as I do it, you'll see it reflected in the design selection. It is not, however, another color stop because it's basically a continuation of color number 1. Okay, so this is not a whole new design. It's actually just adding something to the existing design. I'm going to delete that really quickly because I'm going to go to the drop down below paste, and you'll see that I have 2 more controls. I can paste as design. And then what that does is it gives me a whole new design. Now, the original still looks the way it does because guess what? All those other colors are ghosted out. So if I put them all back. And so if I paste as design, it doesn't make it a part of the design it came from. It makes it its own freestanding design. So I could change the colors. I could do whatever modification I wanted on it, but it doesn't tie it to what I had as design 1. And then my third option there with that paste, if I go back to paste, was paste into new window. And when I click on paste into new window, and this is a little bit harder to see, if I go to the bottom of the screen, just above the color scroll, you'll see I have 2 tabs, untitled and untitled. The first untitled is the screen with the multiple designs. The second untitled is the new screen that I created. So they make different things and they have different purposes. Now, why would I want to take this to a new tab? Well, maybe I needed to do some more editing to this piece, and then I want to take it back over and make it part of the original design. And we're going to do that in a little while. And that is, hang on just a second, because Laurel just left, but she is Instagramming. Y'all, do you know how much I hate all this social media? It makes me super crazy. And I have no idea what she's yelling at me about. But we will hit that unmute and find that out in a minute. Okay.
So what was the difference between paste and paste as design?
Okay, so Barbie's here and says, is that you questioning or somebody else? Okay, Barbie's asking, because I'm assuming she's monitoring the chat too. So if I just paste it, so I'm going to go back here to my left-hand tab, and I'm going to cut this piece away. Okay, so now I have my 3 original designs, my bullseye, my 60s, that would look totally cool on the bottom of the right dress, and my spirals. If I just paste it, and I look at this design selection, do you see how it's now, it looks like 2 eggs, 2 sunny side eggs. It makes it part of the original design. If I paste as design, it makes it its own separate design. Did that make sense? So these additional sort of copy and paste controls are different here. Now, if I'm having trouble with something, if I can't find something, if I don't know how to do something, remember that help is always here. I can go to my help and I can look for something. So maybe if I want to know, okay, I'm having trouble, I need to make more, maybe I need to duplicate. I can go to duplicate and it will give me more information on duplicate, what duplicate is, what it's for. So, or duplicate is just right here on the screen. But just remember that the help topics are always there and they are pretty useful. Also, the internet frequently asked questions are here. So you can type in a question if you have never seen these before. The Online Learning Center gives you some very basic lessons. And this is being sort of ported over to the new SONET Learning Center. But for right now, this still exists. The Purchase Center is down. Okay, so under construction, you can no longer make purchases via the Purchase Center.
Why are these not secure?
Honestly, securing a website is a little more complicated. And it, in some cases, just means that the HTTP needs to be HTTPS. And frankly, there's nothing out here that requires security.
Okay,
You know, I would be worried about places that need to be secure, where I'm giving somebody credit card information, where I'm accessing my banking. Anything like that needs to be a secure site. But this is the Purchase Center, but the Purchase Center is not active, so it doesn't need to be a secured site.
thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so how many ways did we just do the same thing about 17? And you guys are like, okay, Bunny, we get it, which is fine. But I no longer want this piece. Remember that I am highlighted here. So I can just select all visible because I only have this one design highlighted. And I can say, you know what, I don't need it, I can delete it. No worries. If I needed to highlight a particular section, and I can't just select all visible, we've talked about these same controls before. Box select lets me literally draw a square. And here's what happens with box select. It grabs everything within that square. That doesn't always help. Okay. Freehand select, you have to be really steady with the mouse. And I can really closely, but not exactly, get around this. There we go. You're seeing the jumps because it's still part of the same design. I did not cut it out. That was actually a pretty good hand select because I'm usually not that good at this. I'm going to undo that. Freehand point select literally goes from place to place. It's like cutting things out with scissors. Come right here, over to here, and in here.
Hello?
Yes. Questions? Okay, and with my freehand point select, once I've gone all the way around, if I right click, that sort of sets what I selected. And again, I can drag that out. And for whatever reason, this one cut separately and did not jump. Don't ask me, I didn't do it. I mean, I did, but sometimes, oh, there it goes. There they are. So for whatever reason, it didn't render those jumps. Okay, select stitches allows me to select individual stitches. Color block selection allows me to select particular color blocks as I go. So here's one particular color block. Here's another particular color block. So see how I'm sort of migrating these out? These look very steampunk separate, by the way. And then this little one is just its own little color, which I think is sort of weird that it's all by itself in the middle. So I can actually sort of peel apart the layers of designs in Modify. Now let's see if I can get it to go back together if I undo everything. Okay. And then selecting all visible or selecting none. And really, truly, what I recommend is go in and play with these until you save a file as the exact same name as it was before. You won't hurt anything. I could blow this into pieces and save it. And as long as I change the name, I've still got my original. If I, for some reason, overwrite my original, just re-download the software and do a modify repair on your software. Okay, so now that we've played with all of those sort of, how do we get to all the pieces? We can go ahead and actively do something in here in some other components of the screen. Now, I didn't go through the rotation, the center and hoop. Those are all things that we've sort of done before. The original version of Design Player is still up here on the top toolbar, but let's open a new tab within Modify. I don't want to close either of the original two, so I'm just going to go to the word File and then New. And what you'll now see is that I have a blank screen, but at the bottom, I still have those first two tabs. These are all still called untitled because I have not saved them as anything. So it's like what it doesn't have a name yet. And that's fine. If I'm working on something and maybe I want to see what step one looks like, and then I want to copy it into a new screen and save it as step two, I may want to go ahead and save them. And then I could open a series of different tabs and say, well, did I like the change, to the left or to the right? And I can flip back and forth and compare them, which is really a very helpful piece as you're doing some editing. Karen and I did talk earlier about the fact that she uses Modify more than she uses Design Creator, because Modify allows you to take something that already exists and just tweak it out a whole lot. And I will tell you that we are not going to get through every single piece of this because there is tons of this, but we want to get you started. So let's go ahead and either open or insert a design. So if I go to File and Open, or if I go to Insert, whichever one you are happier with, I am looking for, under Documents, Premiere Plus 2, Samples, Premiere Plus 2, Explore, Stitch, and then I want to look at Flowers. Okay. The way that I went in with Open only allows me to open one at a time. If I'm looking for multiples, I need to insert. Okay. And because I'm on a blank screen, I'm not having to worry about replacing what was already there by opening. Okay. Again, I've been in this folder earlier, so I have already changed my view from list to icons. But what I want is Buttercup, which is the first design, and then open. Now, I will tell you that this is a much smaller design in a much larger hoop. So let's go ahead and change that hoop. And the instructions will tell us to change it to a 200 by 200. I will tell you that in working with this earlier, I went to the 150 by 150 right now, and then switched to the 200 by 200 later. And we'll talk about why. But I get a message that pops up that says, do you want us to change the hoops for all of your tabs? Nope, just this one. So depending upon what you're doing, if I have multiple versions of the same design, I may want to change all of the hoops. But that was what that question was about. Do you want to change all of it? Do you want to change some of it? So with this Buttercup, what we want to do is make a little bit of change to this left-hand flower, because we are too far into the season for it to just be a bud anymore. And so we're going to try and focus on this little yellow segment. And we're going to do that either by sliding our scroll bars in and out, or using my draw next color block. I want the green to stay where it is. I want the stems to stay where they are. Flowers. Okay, this is color block 3. Could have gotten to it over here in the color selection by unchecking the other colors. I want to play with this particular flower right here. I want to take it away. This is easy. It's got space around it. In a moment, I want to play with the right-hand flower, and that's a little more complicated because the middle flower is in my way. So let's do the easy part first. I can tell you that box select doesn't work terribly well for this. because I end up in the center flower. So we want to worry about how close together these are. I'm going to right click and deselect that. Freehand select, if I'm good with my mouse or I have a tablet, I can draw. That's lovely. And I can do that here. But if you are not great with the mouse, you do not have a steady hand, do yourself a favor, or things are too close together. Freehand point select is kind of my favorite, just because it's dummy friendly. I can click, and when I click the next point, okay, there's my line. And here is a line, and here is a line, and here is a line. And so I can make sure that I put those, each click into a place where it's open, it's free, and I'm not having to worry about hitting something else. And I'm happy with my positioning. If I right click, then you'll see that I get a box that snaps to just that flower. I don't want that flower in there, so I am going to go ahead and delete it. But, and then you see there's a cut there. I'm going to jump forward one more color block because there is some highlight in this flower as well. So I need to do that again. So whichever way you did the first one, if you did it with the freehand point select, for the second piece, do the just freehand select. Just try them both. Going to delete that second piece. So there we go. I've got that all set. Now I'm still on color number 4. Show me everything. There's everything. This is okay, except now it looks like somebody came along and plucked the flower head off, which is not really what I want in my, what's the word I want? Topiary is not the word I want in my flower arrangement. I need another flower there. So let's go ahead and select this flower on the right, but that's going to be a little bit trickier. Remember what I said earlier about the other piece? So I'm going to actually grab my draw bar, going down to the left-hand side, I'm grabbing this little chisel-shaped control, and I'm going to pull to the right. I don't need any of my greens. Okay, well, you know what? This gets me to my yellow, but this is still in the way. So now I'm going to try and sandwich this in from the other side. I'm erasing my red. I'm erasing my yellow. I'm erasing some more of my yellow. Oh, no, wrong direction. Wrong turn. But while I'm here, I'm going to look at, I want to keep that highlight. I'm going to try real hard to get that right about there. I'm going to give you some numbers in a second. So I'm going to come back to the control on the left, and I'm going to drag it a little further in. I'm going to sort of unstitch that first flower, or actually center flower. But I need to be careful as I do this, because what I don't want to get too far into it. Okay. And so what I did was I got it just far enough to make some space up here. And for me, that's okay. If I still have trouble with this spacing wise, because it may be harder for me to see this, I can come to my zoom to rectangle on the bottom control bar, and I can zoom in to that. And now I can see I've got a really good margin around here. And so I'm still have my freehand select highlighted. So I'm going to left mouse click, hold the left mouse button down, circle around, say hi while I'm here, and come back around and connect. Once that's connected, it automatically snaps to. And I want this flower to stay where it is, but I want to make another one. So I'm going to copy. And it shows up on my clipboard in the bottom right-hand corner. And let's do a little bit of editing on this one that we've copied over to our clipboard. So we're going to paste, but we are going to paste into new window. And now I have just that flower. Now I have 4 screens open. The third one, I'm sorry, 5 now. The fourth one is still called Buttercup because we opened a single existing design called Buttercup. And if I move my slider here all the way in and out so that I can see my whole screen, and I go back to the hoops view, you see this is what I've got. What we're getting ready to do is add a flower here. But we're going to do it on this 5th tab with this little flower. So let's talk a little bit more about kind of some of these controls. We have the ability to modify. Now, some of these are sort of dummy friendly. Compensate stitches. Okay, so this will make things heavier. It'll add more stitches. It does not make your satin stitch wider, Robin. Somebody asked me a question earlier, but this would put more stitches into a particular space. Why would I compensate stitches? Well, maybe I got a design somewhere and didn't have as much coverage as I wanted. It might add sort of more stitches kind of everywhere. Breaking up the stitches, add stitch points. It just kind of adds more stitch points in. If I have things that have really long satin stitches, or maybe fill that I don't like, it's kind of loopy and loose, I can come in here. My density advisor and stitch optimizer are basically 2 of my favorite pieces within this system. Density advisor is older, stitch optimizer is newer. And basically with stitch optimizer, I can just come in, select a design. And remember, I said these controls were here on the bottom for a reason, because I need to select all visible. Because if I stitch optimized nothing, it wouldn't have done anything. Stitch optimizer says, okay, we're going to add stitches, we're going to remove stitches, we're going to add jumps if we need. We're just going to kind of make it prettier and clean it up a little. And it does its fancy math. And don't ask me about the fancy math because I don't do the fancy embroidery math that programmers do. But it just goes in and kind of goes, here's everything. Now I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to take the same piece into Density Advisor. And with Density Advisor, you can see areas of light density, more dense, very dense, and super dense. Super dense designs, if it shows up with a lot of red and orange, this is where you kind of get that thunk, 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 and your hoop starts kind of bouncing because as your needle's pulling back up, it's actually pulling the embroidery hoop up a little bit. That may sound familiar to you guys. So I could take all of my maybe dense and change it to light and say, okay. And then look at my density advisor again. And that just took out some stitches. Now, is it important? Probably not in this particular case. But I might leave it because this looks like, if I look at where I am, it might be where some of these pieces cross over. So you have to evaluate that. Light and dense aren't terrible, but are super dense are going to sometimes be problematic. But do watch, because some designs are super dense for a reason. Things like thread velvet, freestanding lace, they're going to come up red and orange for a very good reason. I'm going to cancel out of that. Trim commands. You can tell it, okay, automatically add trim commands. Software will go in and put a trim in. And you can kind of see, if I zoom in here, you can see it a little bit better. Oops, I'm going to zoom to rectangle. Seriously, it disappeared. I guess it didn't show up better there. Go back to the hoop. There's a little green trim control. And then there's a blue cut control. If I undo that, that little green guy went away. Monochrome, I just want my design to be all one color. Okay, it's not very attractive, but it does show you what it does. So it merges all the colors into just a single. I can do that right on my machine, so the odds of me using it are pretty slim. Basting lines for cutting stitches, separating designs. We're not going to talk about all of these terrible pieces tonight, or at least not right at this point. If I want to change colors, inserting trims manually, inserting stops. You can kind of hover over all of these. I will mention the insert tie-offs and tie-ons. There are sometimes some free designs out there because nobody ever downloads free designs. I have downloaded some free designs that had no ties at the beginning and end of designs, and then they start to come unraveled. These are great little edit pieces. But let's look at what do these controls on the far right do. My morphing, magnetize. So this is a just watch. Take your hand away from the mouse or the touchpad. So if I magnetize a design, see, I create just a North Pole. Okay. It's actually not terrible. I may leave that one. It just kind of pulls the stitches towards wherever you click. Now, I've got to remember how many clicks I'm going to do here because I'm going to come in here and show you it not doing well. So it depends upon where you click. See what happens when I start to kind of pull everything towards the center? It starts to distort my fill in other places. Now that was 3 clicks, so I'm going to undo those 3 clicks. When I magnetized outward, it pulls a little bit open here, a couple places, but it just pulled a hair, and for me that was okay. Just to give it a slightly different shape than the original. Polarize basically does the opposite of magnetize. It pushes. Okay, well, I might want this one to be a little flatter through here. So push and pull. And if I polarize in the center of a design, okay, it pushes all my stitches away from where I was. Twirl, literally twirls a design. Not so good for this particular piece. Is really fun on a lot of things that have lots of straight lines on them. That actually wasn't awful. That was terrible. Okay, so it literally takes a design and just starts to twirl it around. And Wave does the same thing, but instead of in a circular motion, it moves in an up and down motion. But if I go to global morphing, which is really where I want to do a little bit of editing, because I don't want these 2 flowers to look exactly the same. Okay, pinch. Remember what I said to you earlier about those swirls? It won't let me because I'm active right now. But in those swirls, I showed you the first series that we selected. They were the same swirls, but one had been morphed. Okay. So pinch, literally think of using our tablets and our phones. If we want to squish stuff together or spread it apart, pinch will squish stuff together. Ripple acts in kind of a twirl, but it gives us the ability to twirl and then add the repeats. So what happens if I throw a pebble into a pond on the right-hand side? I get all those concentric circles. And then if I ripple it in the process, I get a whole lot of swirling. Okay, not always the best plan. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm back on 0 for that. So you can play with all of these, but what we want to do is to go ahead and skew horizontal. Because we just want the flower to look a little bit different. And we can either left click and kind of drag, or we can change the number. And they say go to a -7, but because I made some other changes, I'm going to take this to a -4. But if you want to follow along at this point, if you have the design piece on screen, you can set that to however you like it. I like that. It's personal preference. Now, Size may be important to me, so I may want to go ahead and show it real size. I may want to keep it at my zoom. I may have a particular piece of the design that I want to look at. So this is as far in as I can zoom. Nope, I can draw a box, and I may want to look at exactly maybe those, 3 or 4 stitches there. So I've got the ability before I'm done to play with this, to change my morphing effects, to preview it, like the before and the after. This should really be like original and preview, in my opinion. But if I'm happy with what I've got, say, okay, that has now modified the piece. My clipboard shows what my original looked like. I want to take this existing flower and I want to copy it. Now, remember, I don't have the ability to select these, so I'm going to come to the bottom of my screen and go to select all visible and put that box around there. And I don't have my copy and paste available. And I can't right click at this point. Don't ask me why. So I do need to go back to the Home tab, and I can go ahead and copy. Okay, so I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go back one tab here, and there's lots of things that I call tabs, and I apologize. I'm going to go back one page to my Buttercup, and I'm going to paste this as a design. Okay. I'm going to go ahead again and select all visible because I want just that one design, and I'm going to move it over. So in my design selection on the top of the screen, you see my original minus the bud. And now I have this one here. And so what I want to do is go ahead and make sure that I have the other color, the other design ghosting, so I can see where that stem is. And I want to bring this down. Now, I can do this by either clicking with my mouse, left clicking and holding, and dragging it around the screen. Or if I'm not great with that, I can use the arrow buttons on my keyboard. And this is called nudge. And I can bring it back into sort of place. But you know what? Right now, it looks a lot like the other piece. And this stem is clearly going in the wrong direction. So what I want to do is kind of get that centered on the stem. If I have trouble seeing this, I can again zoom in. So go to the bottom, go to the zoom to rectangle icon. And I can zoom in a little bit closer. What I want is to be just where the base of that flower is, kind of right on that stem. But my angle is wrong. Remember, we talked earlier about that point of rotation. Let's grab it and let's bring it right down here to the bottom of the flower, because that's what I need to line up with the stem. And then I come over to the right and I grab this control handle that when I hover over it, I get that giant C. And now I can rotate my flower. And I actually kind of like it upright, which I'm surprised at. And if I want it tilty, that's closer to where I'd like it to be. But with that rotation, I kind of lost my stem a little bit. So now I'm using my arrow keys. I still think for me, it needs to be rotated maybe a little bit more. And get that into a place where I'm happy with it. Once I've got that exactly where I want it to be, I've got my angle, I've adjusted my positioning. Maybe I don't like the whole thing and I want to mirror image it. Well, now I've got to go back through all my rotations, so I'm not going to do that. But I like this. It's different enough from the original that it doesn't look like I just copied and pasted the exact same flower over here. I'm real happy with it. Okay. And now I want to combine these. So I'm going to combine the item that's selected with the previous. In this case, I only had 2, so that was really easy. But if you have multiples, do watch that combine with previous. Okay, you may need to actually move the pieces. So let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, I can move, maybe I wanted to combine these swirls and my bullseye, but this other one's in the way. So I can go to my swirl and I can move it over. And then if I combine with previous, those guys got to be one. Hopefully that made sense to you guys. I just like to point out where we don't want things to go sideways. Now I'm still zoomed in real far, so if I want to see the whole hoop, I go back to zoom to fit and I can see the whole screen right there. Okay. On the right-hand side, you'll see that combine did not color sort. So I may want to manually color sort these. So my color 6 and my color 3 are technically the same color thread. So if I go to 6 and I move it up, so it's just below 3, and I merge into, again, previous, so previous color, that made them all one color. And here's now the gold. I can move that up and merge it with the previous color, and I am back to just 5 color changes. Now, if I wanted that flower to be different colors, I would not have done that. I might want a different shade of yellow, because odds are that all of the flowers that come off of a particular plant are not the exact same shade. And that's okay. If I want to see what this looks like, I can either come down here through my play, or I can go up to Design Player. And I can play the whole design from the beginning. Design Player is slower than the scrolls that we have at the bottom of the screen, so I may have to fast forward that a few times, because y'all, I'm impatient. And I will tell you that I may actually look at a design in Design Player first before I ever go to do any editing. But that looks a little more balanced to me. Doesn't look like I have this bud that didn't bloom for me. Okay, that's good. I'm going to cancel my Design Player. But real quickly, just a reminder, this is where I can share a picture or share the video of that play if I want to. I want to share a picture. It asks me what size and where do I want to share it. I don't want to have to log into my social media from here, so I'm going to close that, but I also can save it to my computer and then email it to someone. So we're going to cancel out of both of those. And I want to deselect everything. I don't want anything selected on screen. So I'm going to go to select all visible, but I'm going to go to my drop down and select none. So now I have my design right on my screen. All my colors have been merged. Let's go ahead and look at this design. We're going back to the Modify tab in Density Advisor. Okay. Density Advisor shows me that I have some pretty dense right here in the center of this flower. Probably just going to happen because I've got 3 colors there. I've got the yellow, I've got kind of the gold highlight, and then I've got the red in the center. That doesn't bother me, a little dot here or there. Huge sections of red would be something for me to evaluate whether or not I need it to be a huge section of red. Okay, I'm not going to do anything here, so I'm going to say cancel, but I am going to go to Stitch Optimizer. Let me move this control out of the way. Stitch Optimizer, and if I know we talked about it earlier. Okay, but it improves the stitch quality. It just goes and does stuff. But keep in mind, some designs have short stitches in them for a reason. So there are times where we can say, well, Bunny said that that'll make my design better. Well, yes and no. If there is a purpose for particular stitches, if there is some highlight or some underlay, or maybe there are very short stitches because they're meant to kind of hammer into the background of something, I may not want to remove those. Okay, but for this, let's go ahead to Stitch Optimizer. It took out 247 stitches. Okay, and I want to look at this again in Density Advisor. I've still got those hot spots, but they're teeny. I'm not gonna worry about those. If I look at my trim commands, I'm gonna just tell it automatically add trim commands. It added 2 trim commands. I can kind of see them. They're these little green guys here. But remember what happened the last time I tried to zoom in on this for you guys? They went away. Oh, there they are. They're still little teenies. Okay, so there's my trim commands that it added at that point. Here's a cut, here's a cut. It looks like there's a trim under there and a cut. I can't right now just show you all of just the trim commands. If I see a long jump stitch and for some reason it is not trimming manually or through the automated system, I can literally insert a trim command. Maybe there where there's a cut, and there where there's a cut, and there where there's a cut. Do not necessarily do this because maybe I didn't really want it to trim in all those places. So I'm gonna undo those just in case. I'm actually not gonna save this. But you see what happens when the insert trim commands, little scissors come up next to my icon. That's kind of cute. So it really does tell me where things are. And so the software does insert trims sort of automatically in the base system. I'll show you that in a minute, but it's not always perfect. And jump stitch trim commands are sort of one of those funny things that doesn't always translate when designs come from different software versions. If you want to work with a file that has the highest likelihood of having a trim command built into it, the commercial files, the DST file, is the most likely version of a design to have the trim command codes. However, its colors are always funky. PES is also very likely to have trim commands in it. But when we get over to the VP3s, the trim commands don't always translate. But there's nothing to stop you from just bringing a design in, running it through Stitch Optimizer, automatically inserting the trim commands. It's a mathematical equation. It's computer math, and it says when there's a color change and it goes this far from here to here, and that means that there's probably a trim. Okay, is all I got. Okay. If I'm happy with everything that I've done with this, I'm going to go ahead to File and Save As. Do not save because save will overwrite your original. And I'm going to say Buttercup with blooms. And I'm going to save it as a VP4. And remember that even if I have a machine that does not read VP4, if I save it as a VP4, it's a much more malleable design to make changes to. And then I could file and export it to my VP3 or to my PES or to whichever version I need to export to. Okay, now remember in the export, there's the color sort. So I didn't have to manually do my color changes, and the optimized stitch length is a lot like Stitch Optimizer. Okay, so these are things within the export system that now we're seeing a little bit more in depth as far as what do those things do for me. I'm not going to export that because I can come back and get to it. Now, if I want to see what this looks like, if I want to see a template, I can go to File and Print. And this is a preview of what this would print out as. Do I want the grid in the background for measurement? Well, I don't necessarily need that. Do I want to flip the design? Maybe I just want to see what it looks like the other way, or maybe I am embroidering upside down on something. Okay, a lot of the times bobbin work and felting designs, we do those, without sort of traditional fill stitches. So this isn't really an appropriate design for that, but that's where that flip is. Do I want to print all of the designs, or maybe there's only one design? What information do I want to print with me? Do I want to know the measurements of the design? I don't really care. My template should be to size. Do I care about the hoop information? All I really want is a preview of the design and my thread information, my color. I don't care about the notes and the settings, and all I want is this. I don't want to use all of that ink. So go ahead and pare that down. I happen to like the grid because it does help me if I need to line something up in a hoop. It really helps me get a visual for where it is within the hoop. So I tend to leave my grid on the whole time. And then millimeters versus inches. Well, if most of the time you work in millimeters, but you need to fit this in a 6x6 hoop, well, you may want to go ahead and change it to inches and then print. Now, I don't have a printer connected to this computer, so I'm not going to print. But that's a great way to get something. Now, if you can't print, but you're like, I want to have this visual for reference, newer versions of Windows do have a print to PDF built into them. If you don't have one of those, you may be able to get a PDF generator for free. Okay, and then this is, what did I call it? Buttercup with Blooms, I think was what I called it. Yep, Buttercup with Blooms VP4, but I'm not saving this as a VP4, I'm saving it as a PDF. And now I've got that PDF that I can actually then email or put on a USB or take elsewhere. Okay, if I'm happy with everything that I've done, I can close this. Okay, if I close at the very top right, it's going to close all of my tabs. I'm happy with this one, I've saved it, I'm going to close it. Now it takes me back to a previous tab, so I can go through and play with these one at a time. I'm going to take a minute and I'm going to show you guys what I meant earlier about that swirl design. This is not in the handout. I'm going to delete these other two, and then I'm going to insert okay, so see how, oh, I grabbed a segment of it though. See how this looks a lot like this. Come here, you. Oh, I turned the other color off. Okay, so how do I make this look like the one on the left? Well, and I pointed it out, but I go to my modify, go to my global morphing, and I pinch. And I'm going to move this global morphing effect over so you can see the one on the left. You can see the one on the right. Well, that wasn't quite the pinch that I wanted. So, okay, let's try it with a twirl. That looks really trippy. I need to increase the frequency of these waves. Okay, so see how I'm able to get this like much closer to this. I'll bet at some point in your manual, that looks pretty, I'd already done some other things, so the angles are different. But do you see how this looks a whole lot more like what I have on the left? So this is a really good way to see kind of before and after. And the software does that a lot for us. There are a lot of built-in pieces that are here to educate us. I'm going to close this screen, and I don't want to make changes to any of these. I'm going to close this screen because I'm going to show you one more piece. So I've got this blank screen here. Somehow I got multiple blank screens up. I'm going to insert, and what I'm looking for is under modify, stitch. And this is again not in the instructions, but I'm just going to show you. I'm hoping it's still here. Okay, so see this hermit crab shell, and it says dense, and it says dense for a reason. So I'm gonna open that. This hoop is way too big. I'm gonna go home and change my hoop to my smallest hoop, just for a visual, so we can see it. Now watch what happens if I go to Density Advisor with this design. See all that red? That is going to be some serious thunk, thunk, thunk on my machine. And sometimes we hear that thunk and we think it's the needle pushing through, but sometimes it's actually not. It's the needle pulling back out, and it's your hoop snapping back down as the needle releases. So I'm okay with the things that are light, and I'm okay with things that are dense, and I'm even okay with things that are very dense. But let's take those super dense and let's take them down to very dense. And okay. There's my Density Advisor again, and now I've got this orange and no more red. So let's take my very dense pieces and change them down to dense. Go back into my Density Advisor. So now I've got light fill and dense fill. And based on what I'm seeing where the dense fill is, that's a lot of patterning fill within here, within these darker sections. And then there's a lot of the black that's overlaying that. And I'm going to go ahead and probably let that be. But keep in mind that if you reduce the density and it's part of the design, it may not come out the way you think it will. But I do like to show that because it really is a good piece for Density Advisor. I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm not going to change the original. Close that tab. And so now I'm back to kind of this blank place where I need to go with a new screen. So if I go to new, now I've got just the hoop. Okay, with that being said, I haven't been watching you guys. So let me see if I can bring you back up. If anybody has any questions about what we've done, I know we started a little bit late and we are a little bit early, but this is a lot to process. So I don't want to get any further into other stuff at this point. Does anybody have questions for what we did? There is a lot more to modify that we did not talk about. We did not talk about borders or appliques or the embossing. There's tons to this, but we have to really kind of, oh, and I lied before when I said I couldn't see commands. In fact, I can on the view screen, view tab, my bad. But there's just so much to learn at this point. And there's been this much in other pieces, and we've really focused on the highlights. With Modify, you've got to kind of get the basics under your belt well before we can kind of work further through. And the additional pieces are actually in the reference guides. They come with the software. Now, if you don't know where your reference guides are, real quickly, I'm going to go back out here and minimize the chat.
Honey, Marjorie has her hand out up.
So just unmute yourself, lady.
I just have a quick question in regards to density.
Mhm.
If you were working with a design and say you wanted to reduce the size of the design, would the density then help you reduce maybe some of that too many stitches if you're trying to make a larger design smaller? Does that make sense?
It does. And that's a complicated question because, the short answer is yes, but if you've ever taken a photograph, even into like paint, and you take a big photo and you try and scale it down, it starts to look like mud because it has so much detail. So I had somebody bring me a design. This was actually years ago. Let me see if I can show you guys. She brought me a design that was big. So that's from, I'm trying to find something that I can show you that might work well. Image landscape. Okay, let's see if there's something in here. Okay, this might work. So if I had this landscape and I wanted to make it a teeny tiny, a little 1x2, I could go into my resize. Resize will recalculate my stitch points. I could, bring it down and it recalculates the stitch points, and just bear with me because this is not the best version, but then when I go and I look at it, it looks like mud. I think we can all agree that that kind of looks like mud. So if I want to make a really big change, what I recommend, and this is not in any instruction anywhere, so I apologize. You know what? Am I recording, Karen?
I don't know, honey. I'm answering a question.
Oh.
It does not say.
To make a,
Hang on. Recording on this computer. Yes, it does. Okay. Sorry, I was panicking for a second. So for me, if I were going to make all those changes, I would go into my full size piece and I would do some editing here first. So for example, and this is the modify in the original in the base system, and it's just easier because I'm right here. I might go in and erase out this yellow segment. Okay, because I want the moon or the sun, I can't quite tell, it's either a sunrise or a moonrise, or but I would go in and try and take some of this stuff that looks so busy out. Okay, so I need the background, I need the foreground, I need the one. Do I need those clouds? Well, it depends on how small I'm going to make it. I do need those trees. Do I need this highlight here on the, it looks like snow. So I might take that highlight out. Because to me, this is a little bit cleaner. So that then when I go to resize and I make this really small, and I zoom back in on that really small, it doesn't look so muddy. Is that like, I think that that's a better, I should have copied the first one. But I think that's a better, overall piece. Now, I've got lots of gaps in my stitching, so that's a whole other conversation. But there are multiple variables that go into significantly resizing things. Density is just one of those variables. But the amount of stuff in there, like this tree looks like mud. I actually would have been better off taking out some of the branches. And that original piece that I did was, it was actually an angel, but it was a very stylized angel, and she had all these long strands of hair. And what we ended up doing was taking out like 3/4 of those strands, so that when we squished it all down, you just got the appearance of hair without the appearance of this giant knot of yellow thread, because it was a blonde haired angel. Did that help? I know
And
it was.
Yes,
If we look at it at the real size, it's going to look fine.
Right. Yep. And this is way off, but from here, I think that looks better than, let me just, I'll copy that and let me see if I can undo. Nope, I can't get back to the doofball one, I don't think. I might be able to. Well, here's the original. Resize, bring it down to something pretty teeny. And then if I paste the other one right next to it, and we zoom in on both of these. Now they're not quite the same size, but it gives you a better idea. And I may have needed to leave some of this shadowing in, but if I look at like where I took out that other yellow, I'm not missing it. on the right-hand one at all. This had a lot of fill, so that's a different conversation, but overall, I get a much clearer picture on the right of what I'm trying to look at than I do on the left.
Could you put it through Optimizer first?
Stitch Optimizer first optimizes for the size that it's on. So, I could still play with density. I could play with Optimizer, but there is a reason. I'm going to stop screen share for a second. I'm going to turn on my camera, which y'all know I don't do. But I've been on camera more recently. There is a reason that design companies sell the same design in a series of sizes. Although I look like I have sunburn. We need better lighting. The design optimizers and the stitch editors and all of the stuff only does so much. So if you have a design that you say, I'm only going to buy it in the largest hoop, and then I'm just going to resize it down, don't. Because somebody else has already done all this work. They've created more detail in the bigger ones. And the converse is true. You take a little design and try and blow it up, and you get this like really cartoony looking thing without a whole lot of detail. So, look at what you need. If I need something to be a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, making those modifications is okay. But the big swings, it's like us, as I'm in the middle of trying to fit into smaller clothes. Big swings for us does not do our bodies any good. It leaves its mark. Ask me how I know. So the same with embroidery designs. And if you're making changes, and this goes back to all those tabs in Modify, if you're making changes, camera's here, make a change and then go back to your original and make a change again from your original. Don't make a change on a change on a change on a change if you can. Now that doesn't always apply, but if I'm playing with a resize, I want to resize from my original. I don't want to resize and then resize a resize, because it really degrades the integrity of a design. Did all that make sense? Marge, you didn't have to unmute. You didn't have to go back on mute. You guys can unmute yourselves. And so Robin asked me a question earlier. And since I have 14 minutes, and Karen and I talked about this earlier. So if I open a design, what Robin asked me was if she had an existing design, and Robin was here earlier. If I had an existing design and the satin stitch on it was not wide enough. So let's go in and we're going to take out, actually I want number 2. Okay. So I'm going to select all that's visible and I'm going to copy that. Then going to paste it into a new window. And we talked about this. Could we make this satin stitch larger, wider, without having to change it from scratch? And Karen may have to speak up
I'll go.
at this point because
Let me get here. Let me see. What do I have that satin stitch?
we can, if it's an applique, we can turn it into an applique. But, and I can turn the screen over to you if I need to. So sometimes if you guys ask questions at a time, I don't think we can. The only thing I could potentially do is create a new applique on top of it, Robin, which is a little more complicated than I want to get into tonight. But I don't think there's a way to just make the satin stitch wider. What do you think, Karen?
I'm going on. I have my still on.
Hang on.
I'm going on to my screen to play with it.
Okay, so hang on, where is she? Do, 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 do.
Oops, where am I?
So.
This here.
Okay, I'm gonna spotlight you for everybody. Now we get to see you in bed. Aren't you glad? Can you screen share?
Yeah, let me go back.
I don't know if it's set for you to be able to screen share or not.
It is, I just have to go to. Can you see my screen now?
Nope. That's what I think
Dang.
it's my settings. I don't think it's you. I think it's me. So hang on. Let me
Okay.
see if I can change your control for this. You should make a co-host. Okay. Hang on. There you go. And try it again. I think you had to be a host to share. Nope, we still got you.
Hold on. Yeah, I'm getting it.
Okay.
Okay, let's see here. Where am I? There we go.
Nope, still got you. Oh, there we go. Hang on.
Here we go. Okay, this is that
Yay!
same, it's a lot of satin stitches. I selected the object tab and I clicked on this first group here. Go over to satin column
Okay.
and let's see, properties. Click there. Density, I can put in edge walk, whatever. Compensation, I can change the pattern. Can I not make it? I thought I could make it wider.
Click on the drop down.
Yeah, different patterns.
Okay, no. And the red vertical line on the left. Does that give us any more controls? No. Yeah,
That's the pattern.
yep, okay. I didn't think it was that
thought I
easy.
could, but yeah, let me see here. What does convert do? Oh. I can make it other one. Lighter density. Yeah, we don't want to change the density. But I can add some. That looks horrible. The undo button is your friend.
But back there, you did have a stitch length.
Let me go back. Decreaser, yeah.
Yeah, I think the answer is,
It doesn't look like I can.
yeah.
I thought I could. I wonder. Oops. Sorry, just playing.
But now that we left her with that thought, Robin, she'll play with it. Okay, and on that note, I'm gonna it does weird things to me sometimes, this lovely computer.
I did make it kind of wider using a pattern.
Okay.
stitch, so it's a bit wider, using a satin area instead of a satin column. But that's not really what you're asking for.
Yeah. Okay,
I was looking at the help.
Mhm.
And there's a couple of things in the help about optimizing the stitch length between 6.8 or 0.6, 0.8 and 1 millimeter in some pop-up menu.
Oh, yeah. What the Stitch Optimizer does is if you have a bunch of real tiny stitches,
Mm-hmm.
say 0.6 millimeter, which is super tiny, it's really the size of your thread.
Yeah.
It will combine, say, if you have 2 or 3 of them in one lot right next to each other, it will take the tiny 6 millimeter stitch, get rid of a stitch point and add it to your 1 millimeter stitch.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily want to do that with like freestanding lace because that's just a whole
Right.
different beast. But it, yeah, but getting rid of anything, say 0.6 millimeter, is just fine most of the time. And it'll just add it on to the next stitch. And you won't notice a difference because it's so tiny.
Okay.
okie dokie. So. Do you want to be pinned still?
Oops.
You can be pinned. We don't mind if you're pinned. Well, you're just
Bunny-
gonna be pinned. That's all there is to it.
Bunny, before you go away,
Yep.
when are you going to start the pay-per-views and will they be on Zoom?
They will be on Zoom and we still have. Let me minimize you guys. Oh, I can't minimize. I love technology. Like I just want to get to a screen where I can answer your questions. So the current plan is, actually there are a bunch of current plans with us. We have a bunch of Christmas in July things that you guys are pretty much all on the mailing list, so you'll get notification about that. If I go out to the website, I have software committed through 2 weeks from now, which is actually, since I have most of you here. No, wait, it says next Thursday, but that's not right. It should not be July 1st. It should be July 8th.
Yeah, I thought you must have had something going on.
Oh, well. So, okay, then I guess I get to see you guys next Thursday. Unless that's really terrible for the majority of you. But even if it is, it'll go up on YouTube. So I'm going to stop the recording for this because then we're going to talk about things that aren't really class related.